Yeah, no, for sure. I guess India is a great kind of base because there's like all sorts of diversity in terms of like socioeconomic conditions, infrastructure conditions, cultural, linguistic. So it's almost like a combination of like countries within a country. But that said, we definitely are interested in kind of looking beyond into like a lot more of these like developing countries, especially like within Africa, for example. There's going to be a lot more like kind of challenges, at least in my limited exposure to like Zambia is the only African country that I've personally visited. Definitely like the infrastructure conditions there are extremely, like even more extremely poor than even the most remote place in Jharkhand. So there's going to need to be like further thought and refinement to the GILS model to that context. But like in terms of our operations and extending there, our main kind of entry point is identifying partners that currently have these extension operations running. And the three main criteria that we look at in terms of like identification of a partner that is suitable for digital green is basically three. One is kind of domain expertise. Kind of they've been working in a particular location for some extended duration and have determined that this agricultural set of practices and technologies are useful to this community. The second is like scale. So Green Foundation is a relatively small NGO that we started off working with, which was great because we were just doing like a pilot and we were trying to do like this experimentation of, how should we produce the videos, how do we disseminate the videos, in which place, and all this kind of stuff. But in terms of, really accelerating the growth, as I said, like when you start a pilot, you understand that operation of that organization. And so, if you spend a lot of time, we want to work with a lot of the small NGOs as well, but especially in the initial stage when we have limited resources, we kind of want to work with guys that we can start off working with, maybe in a small sort of pilot, but then have the potential for growth over time. And then the third aspect is kind of trust amongst the community. So that's really critical since we're producing videos and disseminating videos mostly through these community resource people and identifying where should we show these videos, who should we feature. So this kind of rapport needs to be already kind of established, right? So that this digital green system can just be kind of a layer that's relatively easily placed on top. Yeah, so even within like agriculture, the basic approach of like agricultural extension, say as practiced by a lot of like governments around the world, their impression of extension is essentially like technology transfer of just the seeds or the fertilizers and just trying to distribute them to as wide a population as possible with whatever subsidized rate that they might be offering. So that's not really what we're trying to do, right? Our thing is mostly about like capacity building and trying to show them about kind of integrated sustainable models for agriculture. And when you talk about integrated sustainable models for agriculture, then you automatically bring in all these other aspects, whether it's like animal husbandry types of aspects, or whether it's the technology-based aspects, or whether it's some of the gender equity kinds of issues, right? Because you often find that maybe the women are the primary kind of people who are working out in the fields, right? So, how do you communicate the practices in a way that, since they're the implementers, how do you disseminate and maybe change some of their approaches? And at the same time also kind of add on different types of content in maybe other domains. So Digital Green, which you might have read in our paper, was actually inspired by another project, Digital Study Hall, which works in the primary education space. And they basically record the best videos of teachers in private schools and then showcase these videos to government schools in surrounding rural areas, and basically are used in sort of a mediated instruction sort of way that our community resource people show the videos to these adult population of farmers. In that case, in the Digital Study Hall case, they're showing this content to these students, and the teacher is partnered with this virtual, maybe better pedagogically teacher that they can then inculcate into their own lessons. So instead of just kind of reading a textbook and having the kids just write it down, right, they can do a lot more activities, board activities, and all these kind of things. Of course, the context that they're working in is different. They have teachers, their schools. Younger kids tend to be a little bit more excited about learning and about anything and video just generally. But what we can do with Digital Green is once this kind of infrastructure is laid out, you know, there's a lot of similarities, even though the audience and things might be different. So in any given village where we might be running digital green types of, you know, video production, dissemination activities, since these typically may happen like once a day, typically in the evenings, maybe in the daytime, right, in like the local school that's there, then there can be digital study hall type of content. And so then the amortized cost of running, you know, these different types of program over the same kind of capital expenses is that much more reduced. There's also been work even on the healthcare domain, where we're mostly focusing on like women's reproductive health types of issues. But the main kind of thing is about trying to identify these local sources of knowledge, right, that we can capture content from, for whether it's, you know, agriculture, which is our main focus for digital green, or maybe in these schools or these healthcare-based institutions for other types of domain content. So that's still like very difficult to evaluate. So because it's only 2009, so it's like only been like maybe 2 years total worth of data that we have in terms of the controlled evaluation. And you know, I can say that in the first year there was in Karnataka, which was where we were doing the controlled evaluation, there was like a drought, and it was basically like they received 20% of the expected rainfall that they were, you know, averagely expected to receive. And then this year, things have been a little bit more, you know, average. So then when you look at like some of the numbers, you might say that, well, you know, this year there's like all sorts of like greater adoptions, right? But what portion of that is due to the fact that, you know, the videos are going on, and what portion of that is just because now it's more viable to do these agricultural practices because the rains are there. So that's why we are mostly focusing on adoption rates as opposed to productivity rates, though we're tracking this kind of information. And the other thing is to note is that digital green itself is not the one who's, you know, providing the expertise on what are these agricultural practices. So the kind of onus that we're kind of relying upon is on our partners who have worked for like these 10 or 15 years in these particular localities. And a lot of these organizations have research components to determining which technology are we going to bring in, maybe from the outside, maybe what technology or practice is already existing within the community but maybe is not spread and maybe beneficial to more people. So they've kind of established this kind of, you know, mix of practices or package of practices that are worthy of being captured and then disseminated. And they've done like research on that. But kind of for digital green to say amongst the farmers that have come to the video screening specifically, we would need at least like a 5-year time horizon is typically what, you know, agriculturalists use for saying that this was the improvement in productivity or income gain.